Let's now take you back to one of our top stories where we've been looking at the completion of 100 days of the Israel-Hamas conflict, with protests in Tel Aviv and global capitals like Washington, D.C. and London favouring return of hostages in peace, while Israel's Netanyahu says even the ICJ, that's the International Court of Justice, can't stop the fighting till the Hamas is eliminated. Joining us now to talk about it is Professor Vardhan Pant, Vice President, Observer Research Foundation. Good evening to you, Professor Pant. What do you make of the prospects right now of this conflict, which doesn't seem to be ending, giving any indications right now of ending, although there is mounting pressure really to come to some sort of a negotiation table and then move towards peace, return of hostages, humanitarian efforts as well, to ensure that less and less people die, and of course there's relief for those who've been left stranded as well.
Well, Gautam, 100 days after the crisis first erupted, after the war started, I don't think are any closer to its end as of now, because there are hardly any incentives. And in fact, we have seen an escalation happening beyond just the Israel-Hamas dynamic. We have seen how far it has escalated, the entire Red Sea dynamic, and the Lebanon front has been opened up, and then the entry of Iran through its proxies into this war has raised tensions. America has made its position very clear in some regards. So I think by and large what we are witnessing is that for Israel, they do want to ensure that Hamas is decapitated. Hamas is not in a position to launch the kind of attacks that we saw on October the 7th. But I think there is no guarantee as of now that they have achieved those objectives or are any closer to achieving those objectives. So I think the strategic dimension remains frozen, and which means that Israelis, as they grieve for their missing ones, I think there is a lot of frustration that while the war is raging on, they are no closer to either getting the hostages back or to any kind of a resolution to this seemingly open-ended war at this point.
Why has that not happened as yet? Because Israel some days back said that it's completely cleaned up northern Gaza. There's no Hamas there left now, and yet we've seen even, I guess a little bit over 24 hours ago, rockets were fired from northern Gaza.
Well, I think it's very difficult if you look at the kind of structures that Hamas has created in Gaza over the course of the last decade, and the kind of entrenchment that we have seen in Gaza. I think it would be foolhardy for Israeli defense forces to believe that they have achieved the objective of decapitating Israel, Hamas, to a point where they cannot regroup. And I think that's the real danger here, that after suffering a humiliating attack, if it is now the question of Israeli forces' credibility, and I think they want to reassess and they want to recalibrate the deterrence posture vis-a-vis the neighborhood. And in this case, I think there is a sense that if they do not deliver strong commitments on the ground, then I think there is a danger that something like what happened on October the 7th can happen again. And that's where I think ultimately Israel's position is. Israel believes that its entire survival depends on ensuring this or re-establishing the deterrence vis-a-vis its adversaries, and I don't think they have calculated or they have assessed that they have reached that point. So I don't think that is likely to happen anytime soon. And I think the most important player in this regard is going to be the US. The war is likely to continue so long as the US will allow Israel to continue this war, because in some ways US also believes that some of these actors need to be put in their place. But as the war escalates, I think there is a real danger that it can move beyond just the Israel-Hamas dynamic, and that may ensure that Americans have to come back and reassess once again, how they want to pursue their interests in the region, because a lot of their allies are now coaxing Washington to push Israel in a direction. It has not happened so far, but I think that's where the real pressure on Israel is likely to come from.
Is that primarily because of what the Houthis have been doing? They've been targeting all kinds of civilian ships, that are crucial to all kinds of global trade, not just oil but others as well. The entire supply chain could be substantially disrupted, and the Houthis are perhaps proving to be as resilient despite the American and British actions against them. They're practically mocking the Western powers that you've not been able to do anything despite all your military might, your superiority. We can still fire rockets at you, fly drones and target ships.
Absolutely, I think the Houthis are, in some ways showing that they have been able to muster enough resources to target, the shipping lanes, to target some of the most important powers in the region. And I think their ability to do that certainly has a state connect, and therefore I think Iran is now is being pursued vigorously, because ultimately there is a consensus which seems to be emerging that it is Iran that is behind all of these proxies that have suddenly woken up and are wreaking this havoc. But because of what is happening between Israel and Gaza and what Israel is doing in Gaza, there is a lot of support that we are also seeing for what Houthis are doing. So I think it's a very difficult situation in that regard as to how do you assuage the concerns of the Arab street and at the same time take on these strategic challenges that are emerging to global commerce and the sea lanes of communication. So I think for America and for its partners, this is a very, very delicate time. But I think also for countries like India that rely on freedom of navigation and free sea lanes of communication, this is going to be a very difficult time for global commerce if something is not done very, very quickly.
Yes, already there's data emerging that the Suez Canal is losing a huge amount of business because of that. And one big reason why we've had an External Affairs Minister going to Tehran as well. What can we expect out of Dr. Jaishankar's visit to Iran?
I think certainly Dr. Jaishankar would be conveying the concerns that many in India have and many around the world have, that if the present trends continue in the Red Sea, then I think the entire global commerce will be affected, and some of the most vulnerable countries would be the ones that would be most affected. The major powers can take care of themselves for some time at least, but if the global commerce is affected, global trade is affected, then I think some of the most vulnerable countries, some of the most vulnerable populations get affected. And I think that's a message that in some ways India has that leverage vis-a-vis Iran, that it can convey and kind of act as an intermediary also between the West and Iran, which are, I think, trying to also recalibrate their positions, especially the West, which is now trying to signal to Iran that some of these proxies will have to be contained if the larger conflagration is to be avoided. So I think here India is in a really interesting a position as a global leader, trying to position itself and trying to contain a conflict from escalating.
Mm-hmm. And do you see that happening? Because right now, again, as you yourself said, there are no indications. But what do you think could change the situation dramatically?
I think certainly the costs for Houthis rise, and I think Americans and their allies are indicating that they are targeting positions for Houthis. That is a military target, and I think they've said that they want escalation dominance, and I think that is certainly going to be part of this landscape. But certainly some political engagement between Iran and the West becomes necessary. So in some ways, we are also looking at at an entirely implausible scenario where because of the pressure in the region, Iran and the West may start a process of at least engaging with each other so as to contain the conflict from escalating. And again, India has an important role, and some of the other countries have an important role because of the dynamic of global commerce. But I think the Israel-Hamas dynamic certainly relies most on American pressure and how much Americans feel that is connected to the wider conflagration. If they feel that they can't contain wider conflagration without pressurizing Israel, then I think there is a greater likelihood that Israel might be pressured to relatively speedily conclude this military posture of its in Gaza in particular.
Okay, well then the next few days could be quite critical, and let's see if India in some way can be involved in moving the needle towards peace as well in this context. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Professor Pant.